you writing? When you write like your first draft, or when you're jotting down your notes and everything, is it in English straight away? Like, do you, like Rebecca was saying, you write in English, you think in English. Yeah.
For me, I wrote the drafts in English. Yeah, but I have my own Tokles, or my own indigenous language, and we also have Pidgin language, which is commonly spoken in Papua New Guinea. But I wrote in English.
Yeah, I think to add on to that, for me, especially when you write in the context of the Pacific Island, your culture, we have what we call the common phrases in the community. It's part of the daily communication. We use languages, so usually I use those words or phrases in our dialect, and then I have to convert them to English. Sometimes it will not really make a lot of meaning in English. That's why you have to be creative by putting in a way that they can understand. I think because you cannot all the time use English words. I like the expression from the English, like most of the expression from the novels is what maybe from Shakespeare or whoever came up with. But it's good. We have a lot of expression in our own languages. We have a lot. So that's when some of the communication, especially when you come up with a dialogue in a communication, I use those expressions and try to explain in a way that the reader can understand.
So Tama Samoa, or even Taini Samoa, we have expression of the language in there as well, just to help engage some of the boys that actually use it. It's mainly with regards to slang and words of that nature, or appropriate obviously, to try and engage some of the boys there. So that's what we do. But I just wanted to make a comment, or actually acknowledge the brothers here. Just been really inspired by just listening to the stories here. But we spoke last night, Nathan, with regards to some of the challenges with the country or the government that have that lack of support for writers, in particular male Pacifico in your culture. I was just wondering if you could sort of elaborate on that a little bit in terms of some of the challenges there.
Yeah, sure. So most of the writers in Papua New Guinea, and I'm sure Marlene would agree, are academics. So they probably went from university and then see the importance of writing, and then they write, especially in an academic perspective of things, because writing is not really a big thing in PNG. Of course, we have many stories to tell. We have stories about rivers, mountains, lakes, imaginary fiction stories and all that. But it's not really supported by the government. We don't have a writers' association. So it's really tough out there. We may have good stories to tell, but it just stays there with people. And for me, like most the story about my grandfather is basically told to me. It's already transferred from generation, which I have to, like in my own language, which I have to translate that in English. So those sort of stories, like when you have that sort of challenge early in the beginning of writing the story, and then you don't see the support from people or from writers that went ahead, it just gives you, pushes you down, I think. Yeah.
I want to ask a question to the three of you, and like looking at this picture, Tama Samoa in the back, that male.
Is that Julie?
Standing.
Yes, that's been
Great tattoos, by the way. There's a picture of the older male and that child, that boy.
Yes.
And I see that as, the three of you, in your own journey as, kind of literary, kind of forging a path for males, for Pacifica males, for the older generation as well as the younger generation, and telling those stories. So, I really like that imagery, and I just wanted to ask, now that you've put yourself out there, I have a 13-year-old boy, soon turning 14. I have an 11-year-old. I want those two boys to now look up to males like you as role models. But I just want to know what are the challenges that you're facing, and what are the opportunities that are coming up. And you spoke about some of that in terms of your wellness workshops that you do. But what are the opportunities that are out there to kind of support you in these roles that you maybe willingly, but also in some cases maybe mistakenly stumble upon them. What are the opportunities that lie there, the challenges that you think?
Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, it's a wonderful piece of art that's been created, and it was created by another Samoan, Tama Samoa, Alex. And he's in Queensland. Yeah, so yeah, really powerful. In terms of the challenges, I think when you mentioned that, if I could just share a little bit about the process at the start. So Tēnei Samoa, Tama Samoa was like a sequel to Tēnei Samoa. Tēnei Samoa came out first, and my lovely wife, being the person that she is, has this idea, and once she gravitates to that idea, she doesn't let go, and she wants to make that happen. Yeah, she wants to make that happen. So she's like, you know what, we need Tama Samoa. And I said, yeah, we do. We do need Tama Samoa. That's great. And I'm like, oh, who do you reckon should be the person that actually co-authors that with you? And she's looking at me like, And I'm like, oh, it's going to be you. And so I'm like, whoa, okay. So now this starts a process, right? Starts a process to be able to challenge my beliefs in terms of writing, because I at that stage, and still a little bit today, I sort of struggle with it. I sort of struggle with identifying as going, oh yeah, I'm a writer. And at the start, I was like, I'm not a writer, right? I'm not who's going to listen to this story? Who's going to listen to what I have to write down in words of the paper? Is this even going to get sold? I'll tell you what, why don't you go find someone else that's actually, academic and,
Okay, first I would say that growing up, especially in Pacific Island countries, you will come across literature. We study literature in high school, and most of the writers from another country. For us in the Solomons, mostly we have most of our literature in high school are from Papua New Guinea, short stories, and also from Tonga, I guess. We also have playwrights from the famous writer herself, Dr. Taman. Yeah. So those are some of the writings, literature we study in high school, and it's hard to find like a writer. Like we study literature in a in a class where someone from Solomon Islands wrote a book. So also in high school we study a book by an African writer. Yes. So those are the literature we studied. So it's outside of the Pacific context. And there's another novel I guess we studied. So it's English writer, I forgot. Charles Dickens, and then the Lord of the Flies. Yeah, that's right. So you see, when we come up with this, reading those stories, where do we fit in all these stories? Mm-hmm. So those are kind of things that as young male or children from the Pacific have to come up with those thinking. We have to train the children to think like we have to teach them to be motivated, like we have to read our stories, not a story from another place, which is will not some places will not relevant to our country. So this for me personally, this are the kind of thinking that made me, I have to write a book, and by doing this, I will kind of I will somehow trigger some of the young writers out there. We have a lot of storytellers. If you go to a community, some of those boys, they can sit there whole day just telling stories. Just telling stories, and those stories can go on and on. So actually we have a lot of story. It's just triggering them to put something down. So most of my stories, I just go and discuss, tell stories, making jokes with the boys, and you will not believe how they will come up with a lot of stories, and you just forget about the time. Yes, this is so. Yes, it's like for us, how I see it, like the three of us here. I think this is a big achievement. We say, yep, just putting us there that we are. there are male writers out there.
Coming along
Yes.
as well.
Yes, and then we can think like something for the young writers out there, male, to come up and share the story as well. Because, as you rightly said, we have more female writers than male writers. I think it's a fact. In the Solomons, we also have poets, mostly female, and not many male writers. So I think this is like the same challenge we face. So we got to start somewhere, putting our stories together. And I have to admit, I love reading female author stories. The one thing I have to admit is that they are more detailed in every scene of a story. If they tell a story like, yes, they can explain every single step from here to that gate. Male writer, jump here, get and out. This is honest. This is my view. So if you want to know the details and specific of a story or scenery, please go for a female writer. They more into detail of every scene of the story. Yeah. And then male writers, we just jump to the points. I have to admit this. I read a lot of books on this. I think that's what I can say. Yep.
I agree with the same sentiments. I mostly relate to Mani's story as well, because mostly in Papua New Guinea, like it's like people, like the society expects us to like go to school, finish college, finish university, and graduate and make your family proud. If you don't make it through school, then you stay, because we own the land, you stay back in the village, you look after the pigs, grow the trees and all that. So sometimes it's the expectation of the society itself, and we as Melanesians, specifically men, it's really the masculinity and all that. So, I didn't think I would write. Definitely, I wouldn't write or put a story out. Yeah, and especially like come to Townsville. And I'd like to thank Anna for that. Like, you are doing a really marvelous work.
And Jenny, one of our chief volunteers over here.
Because, yeah, like I said, I didn't think that I would come out here, especially write, and be part of this festival and all that. And my first book or short story, it was realized by someone from the other side of the world. Yeah, and I did write it like a few years back in 2020, and I submitted to some of the blogs and all that, and then they kept saying, "Oh, we'll publish it. It is going through this process, that process," and then it delayed all the way until Anna came across it, and then I'm part of this. I'm getting this exposure and all that. So I think for people like me of my age and all that, aspiring writers, I think to write indigenous stories, First Nation writers, they need, I think, people like Anna. And when they asked me, how did you get that award? Or how did you become part of this or get recognized and all that? And how can we be part of that also? Like, how can we make something that people would read? And I told them, well, just write and send your books to Anna. Yeah.
Also the fear about not knowing the language, and then and also the stories that get told are being vulnerable in the sense that they admit that they don't know the language and may feel like they're not actually Tama Samoa. We have a saying that you could be plastic Samoan, whereas you're not really because you don't speak the language. So therefore they cave in and they go, well, okay, then I'm not going to learn it. But if we start to actually read these stories that other people are actually feeling the same way, then it opens it up and goes, oh, actually, this person's on the same journey, how can we go together? And actually start learning it together and learning it more, at least be open to the language a bit more.
I'd just like to say something about language too, because like for instance, my father's clan, Darug people, the language is a dead language, like it's never used. But there's been a regeneration in Australia of looking for languages and bringing them back, and for non-Indigenous people too, wanting to celebrate Australia's unique languages. And so hand in hand, there's that encouragement for Indigenous writers to include fragments of Indigenous language. Now, always, anyway, rude words and certain nouns have always been there, kind of like in quiet, private language. You know, you want to go to the Jilla and that's something. But the notion of even bringing more words back is what I've tried to do, and I do find I just kind of insert them, and sometimes I have to actually do the translation immediately after, because the words are not familiar. Yeah, but in my most recent novel, which is contemporary, the languages are still living in Aboriginal communities, so I've tended to assume that a lot of Aboriginal people will read them. But I also know the main audience for my books are non-Indigenous people. So it's kind of, you constantly kind of play this kind of trick of slowly bringing in language, and I quite like to use a glossary, but modern publishers that I deal with don't like to use a glossary. They say, no, we must be able to understand the word within the context of the sentence. And I think they're right. I think they're right. But I still do like a glossary, I must say.
I want to add on to the relevance of I think one thing you have to consider for the audience is the relevance of the story to the period of time. So for the book, when I put together ideas, is that you targeting the readers, and also not only within the geographical location, but you have to think outside, because they also want to learn about the country or the people and such. So in such a way, you have to come up with a story that captures like a bit about the culture, the people, and a bit of history. So for me, putting up a book is you have to target like, because we have history that we need to share with the younger generation. I think this is important for me. Many of our history, many of the things are in the Pacific never been documented, and it's disappeared. So I think putting books, it will create a need for younger generation, at least they know what's happening. And I would just give an example for Solomon Islands. We have ethnic crisis like 20 years ago, and there's hardly any writings about it. You only find it in whatever documents or whatever. But how will we inform our younger generation that there are bad things happening, and we have to find ways to prevent those things from happening? And there are many ways to do that, just by telling stories, sharing them ideas. And similarly, not for the local people, we can also, people outside the country can also learn about the history and culture and the people of the country. I think so. It's about the relevance of the story and how they will learn from it. I think this is how I think when I put up ideas for a book. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree on the relevance part. The story, like, it has to be relevant. Like back from where I'm from, like. We have 800 plus languages. Like there are 22 provinces, and you go in one province and there are more than 40, 50, even 100. But luckily for me, where I'm from, like in my province, it's only one language. But I cannot write a story in my language because it would be really confined, and it would be subject to like ethnic clashes and say that, oh, you're only targeting your people to hear your story and all that. And it can really like, it can go, explode and all that, like, because we have ethnic groups and all that, and tribes and all that, like, depending on all the languages that we have. And we cannot write in Pidgin, because we are brought up in a system where you have to speak English from grade 1 upwards, university, college and all that. So all your stories have to be in English. Though Pidgin is used to communicate and all that orally, but stories have to be in English. I do remember a guy from my province who written some books in Pidgin, but he has to translate them in parentheses, in brackets of what he's saying and all that, but that goes a long way. Yeah.
Yes, I just want to add on to what Nathan has said. Like in Papua New Guinea, we have over 800 languages, and there's so many different like cultures in Papua New Guinea. The people, we say, through all these 800 languages, we say we are one people, one nation, and we have this common language, Tokpisin, all right? So I'm going to base on my area as well. I'm from the islands in Papua New Guinea. I'm from Bougainville. And in Bougainville, we have over like 10 languages in Bougainville and different dialects as well. So if I had to write my story in my own language, then I don't think anybody would read it, you see? Because in Papua New Guinea, we teach in English. I teach English. I'm a language and literature teacher. So when we write in English, it goes out and reaches everyone. It goes out and reaches everyone. No child or no youngster these days would want to read in any language, like a local language, because they don't know how to read in the local language. Our curriculum is written in English as well, so all our stories are written in English as well. Even when people try to write it in Pidgin, like what Nathan has said, they're asked to translate it into English so that it can reach the different kinds of languages in Papua New Guinea. Yes, so that's what our country is like. Like we have all different cultures in Papua New Guinea as well as different languages as well.
I just wanted to reflect on what you said, Joshua, about when you get together and they can just tell so many stories and you can, so I've been a Pacific Islander girl for a long time, and I think the thing I love about Pacific Islander culture is that you can sit together and you can tell the story and you can laugh the first time, but then you tell it again and it's funnier the second time. And by the fifth time, like you're all just in stitches and laughing and laughing and laughing. So I guess the question is, how can you capture that in a book? Like that repeating and that retelling and that story, orally, it's funnier. The more you do it, the more you say it, it's funnier. So I'm a real visionary, and so I'm looking at what you have shared and what you're doing currently in New Zealand, and I'm saying take that inspiration back, guys. Take that inspiration back. And go and meet with groups of young guys or young people and sit around and do that telling and that laughing and that storytelling, but then get out your books and read it. And don't just read it once, read it twice, read it 3 times, and let them laugh and come together in that comedy of storytelling so that they can see, that written word can become something else. Like that oral, can become something else in that written form. You can still share it and have that joy. So it was just a brainstorm I had, and I'm like, want to throw that back to you guys. What can you do to take that oral joy of story sharing?
I think I have to admit that for us, telling stories is very common. We say so a lot of jokes, and sometimes someone get offended, then we just have to apologize and maybe start another different story, I guess. So yes, usually to make the stories, as you said, how can you make it? Because for us we have what we call we have stories. From the case of Solomon Islands, we have small custom stories. Some of this is fairy tales. If you go online, you can see it's, we have what they call the giants. I never see a giant, never. But we have a lot of documents about the giants on the island of Guadalcanal. You just go online now, type Google giants of Guadalcanal, you have a lot of it. But for me, as a person growing up in Guadalcanal, still never see it. I think it's just like something you just imagine, yeah. But they say this, some people say this. So it's like the story of the giant will continue on for generations.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. So we're gonna tell it today, we're gonna tell it tomorrow, and the next day. So you see, the relevance of the story, it just cannot. It's part of us. So I think the only thing we can put those things in a written form, and again the reader have to judge for themselves. I think I also touched in my book some of those. If you read it, but I'm not saying these are real. You have to come up with your own conclusion. Yep, we open up. Similarly, if you come to the Pacific Islands, you will hear the stories. You will hear them many times, and the relevance of it will still be there. we are gone and he will still be there.
But the story will be different every time.
Yeah.
And
And funny.
you write it down and then someone changes a word. Next generation, it's fantastic.
The island story. I'm just running through the island stories. I'm like, the banter and the laughter that comes from. I mean, guys, as Pacifica, we can actually laugh at nothing, and we're just laughing at because we're laughing, and it's for some teachers it drives them nuts when they're at school. But again, that's who we are, and we don't want to lose that. But yeah, you're exactly right. How do we transfer that into storytelling or into the writing world? And I think the great part with regards to the Tama Samoa book is that we have a character that's solely dedicated to that kind of personality, and he's telling his jokes. Yeah. Oh yeah. Same with yours. Oh, nice. I'll look forward to reading it. But yeah, it caters to exactly that, and the boys resonate with them. So every time we're running a class or running a workshop and we say, hey, who has a friend here that's similar to Lima, everybody puts their hands up because they all know a guy who goes, oh yeah, it's him. But yeah, it's that guy, he keeps teasing me, or whatever it is. But yeah, it starts the conversation, and I agree there needs to be more stories like that out there that are used to engage our people in. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, just to add on, like Mani has said, people have to resonate, know that there's particular group of people like boys who really could bring out that humor and make people laugh and all that. And I'm not sure if you are writer and you can have both of those personalities at the same time. But the people that I grew up with, there are few individuals in a group or a community, they really identified, recognized to bring out that humor, in their stories and all that. And but for me, the older books I've read have been biographies and all that. So it turns out that I wrote a biography for my grandfather. So I would put that sort of humor and all that would be, it would be like inspiring to put people to look up to someone and all that, to learn virtues from someone's life story. So that's what I want to put in these books when people read it. Yeah.
And just one last comment as well is the understanding that comes from that for our educators. So even when we've had comments from our educators that are reading it and go, oh, so they're not talking about me. It was like, no, they're not. It's got nothing to do with you. It's just how they connect, And so understanding that is quite crucial. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Look, we must break because I know some people are hungry. There's just a couple of things. Short stories. Gentlemen, thank you so much. We are so honoured.